excited to welcome Mason to the show. Mason is a serial entrepreneur, eco-warrior, and all-around innovator who turns big ideas into companies. His mission is to make life greener. Have you always been in Austin?
Yeah, born and raised.
Okay.
I moved away twice. Once to West Texas, which was very boring, but it was an engineering internship. And then I moved to Spain for a year once.
Whereabouts in Spain?
Alicante, it's on the Mediterranean coast. Costa del Sol, kind of south of Valencia, more people know that one. And that was amazing. I was trying to start a chain of pizza restaurants over there. It didn't work.
Was that your first go at entrepreneurship?
No, I had one before that, landscaping. And so I went to work have we started? Is this
We're going to roll into it whenever we feel. Yeah, let's do it.
I graduated as a chemical engineer. My parents paid for my tuition and books, and then I had to pay for everything else. So I always worked through college. But when I graduated, they were like, we paid for your tuition. I know you want to be an entrepreneur, but you're going to be a chemical engineer. And I'm like, all right. So I got a job as a chemical engineer here in town. We were helping oil companies file permits with the TCEQ, the environmental board here in Texas. And two reports came across my desk on the same day. One was that the number one pollutant to Texas waterways was residential fertilizer. And then the second one was the results from a long-term study showing that organic fertilizers were better in every way you can measure, except they were a little more expensive in the beginning. Long-term, they were cheaper. So cheaper to do it long-term. Everything about them was better. I go to Home Depot and I'm like, what's the deal with this? How is this our number one problem? And it's, worse than the alternatives. And there was a Scott's lawn care guy there being like, hey, let me show you, what you need for your lawn. And I'm like, what about those organic ones over there? He goes, oh, they don't work. I'm like, oh, okay. This is a marketing problem. And landscaping is not rocket science. So I was like, I'll, do this, learn the fundamentals of business. Did it for a couple of years, discovered that there's not opportunity for marketing in it. People only care about their lawn when they move or if their lawn's dying. So it's a pretty slow rolling game. And I was way too ambitious back then. So, I had prior spent a summer in Spain as some friends did study abroad. I just played volleyball on the beach and learned about the culture a little bit and decided that Alicante in particular has a 5% standing study abroad student population and 0 American pizza. So I was like, I'll bring American pizza here, got a built-in customer base, introduce better tasting pizza. Because even in Spain, they were all like, yeah, the pizza sucks. Like, why do y'all eat pizza so much in America? And I'm like, well, it's different than this one. And so put together a business plan, raised some American money, and went over there to try to start a chain of American pizza restaurants.
That's so wild. What do you think went wrong? You said it was only a year, so.
Yeah. If I were to try to externalize it, I would say that the dollar lost 30% of its value against the euro from the time I bought my ticket to Spain to the time I landed in Spain. So my American investors were like, that was kind of your return, where you're going to get return. But then I was like, okay, well, I guess I need Spanish investors, and started, pitching there and thought I found some. And then the Madrid bombings happened. It was right, there were wars going on. It was a pro-American, pro-capitalist government. The bombings happened. The opposition blamed it on that. And it was 3 days before the election. And so it totally flipped the election, swung the votes by 20% or something crazy. And so the government flipped. My Spanish investors were like, how about we sell you all of our restaurants because we're getting out of Spain altogether. That that's if I was going to externalize it. The real reason was that I was not an international businessman, and I was in over my head, and just throwing things together, and there were roadblocks everywhere. And I was like, all right, this was a lot harder than landscaping, because I'd sold that company and made money off of it, and was like, entrepreneurship's pretty easy. I can do this stuff. And then it's like, all right, there's a pretty wide scale of entrepreneurship.
Was that your first experience of like being, I don't want to say a victim, but being affected by things that weren't in your control? The election, the bombings, et cetera.
Yeah, in a way that impacted me. Yeah, I always felt like, that I was in control of what I was doing, and and that I could accomplish anything. And, I still somewhat believe that, but I think, luck is just a huge part of entrepreneurship. And I know so many amazing entrepreneurs who have just struggled their whole career because they just haven't hit that one. And then, some real cocky entrepreneurs who get lucky once, and they think they can do anything and everything. And it's usually the ones who have sold a company and found success and jump over to something else, and who then fail. And then, you either learn the good lessons from that or not. But I think there's amazing lessons in that. And about one of the biggest ones is that there is so much luck in this career choice.
Definitely. It sounds like, so you identified obviously the landscaping business through the means that you did, and then same kind of thing when you went over to Spain. You identified this opportunity that there was already a customer base there. They didn't have the product that you were seeking. Was this always something as you were growing up that you were able to identify these opportunities and execute on them?
I think so. When I had kids, I read this book about brain development, and it said that work ethic is instilled between the years of 7 and 13. And my parents declared bankruptcy when I was 9, and we had to move out of our house and sell our cars. And luckily some people helped us and got a different house, but had this just horrible car, and I was so embarrassed about everything. I didn't get the nice shoes that other kids got to play baseball and all that. And so I think that was when I really was like, and my parents were good hard workers, and they had been affected by external events, the bust in the 80s. My dad was working in Midland for an oil company when the floor fell out, so we had to move away from there, and still had that house. I was part of the bankruptcy. It was in Odessa. Apparently, nobody could sell any property at all, so that was just dragging them down. And then they bought a house in Austin, and it fell apart. It was brand new build, but it was on shaky ground or something. And so, they were hit by all these things, but my dad was an electrical engineer, smart guy, just, trying to make it all work. And so that's when I decided that entrepreneurship is a way to make sure that I'm not dependent on anyone else for my money, which, is naive. You're still, everyone's dependent on everyone else when you're, working in an economy. But that's what really instilled in me to find opportunities to make money and go after them. And then, begrudgingly, it was my parents, real leaning towards sustainability and environmental consciousness that came back up as an adult, where I'm like, you know what, we do need to take care of this planet. It's the only one we got. So that was part of my, really, that's what really got me going towards sustainability. And then while I had the landscaping company, I developed a philosophical challenge with lawns, where it's we're putting water on it, which is a scarce resource, to make it grow, just so we can cut it down, and then we feed it some more so it'll grow better, just so we can cut it down some more. And I'm like, where did lawns even come from? Why do we have these things? And So I was kind of struggling with that. I'm like, I'm going to research sustainability. And I felt like our three main challenges at the time, which arguably are still our three main challenges, are energy, water, and food. Energy and water are both just massive challenges that have huge external factors with weather and such. And so that's when I was like, I think I'm going to go into food. And food is an amazing industry where people interact with it on average 3 times a day. And so each of those interactions is a conversation and an opportunity to convince people of potentially better ways, or what we believe are better ways. So that was the genesis of my next company after the Spanish adventure, which was called Greenling. And we were grocery home delivery. We did a Meta-CSA product, was what we started with. So food from local farmers all around. And then we started adding curated organic goods.
I'm going to circle back on all of the business ideas, but first, I really like what you said about your past and your history and the way you grew up and that sort of thing. And I'm sure there's many lessons that you learned from growing up, and experiencing what you did. But do you think there's anything that you might have learned from your parents or those tough times that sticks with you today and kind of is a core value or maybe not a core value, but a philosophy in the way that you approach business and life?
Yeah. One thing I learned later on that I didn't realize at the time was that my parents worked really hard to make sure that I didn't feel poor. And there were some obvious things like having to move, and the cars got way worse. And I'm like, something is wrong here. But we would still go on vacations, and it was way later when I realized, like, we'd go to Florida and we're driving down Daytona Beach, and I'm like, that place looks amazing, let's stay there. And they're like, we just want to see all of them, we just want to make sure we can. And we end up way down the beach at this kind of rundown place that had rocks on the beach, so it didn't even have sand anymore. And I'm like, no, let's go back to those. And they're like, we're tired now, let's just go ahead and get this place. And all of that was to make us not feel like we were poor. And I think that I think really helped me have the confidence to go after what I wanted.
So let's talk about the sustainability piece. Obviously, that's been a large driver for you, as you mentioned already. Is there a moment that you can identify where that became important to you?
I think it was those reports that came across my desk where I'm like, wow, the environment is being damaged, significantly here. The state has to spend billions of dollars to try to remediate the residential fertilizer going into rivers. And yet it was a worse solution than what was out there. And so then, and so that was the moment. It was building up with this role as an engineer helping these companies. The moment when I decided to leave that role, it was a chemical company down south of Houston needed to put in a new smokestack that was spewing methyl mercury, which is super toxic, acute, long-term, everything about it's bad. And I was filing the permit, and I'd look at the regulations and then look at their application and help fill out the application. And they're like, well, the regulations say it needs to be a 1/4 mile from any elementary school. Had this little map with a pretty poor scale. Back then we didn't have digital maps. And I saw the little school with the flag, and I was like, I can't measure this. I can't tell if the corner is the closest point or what it is. And the lead engineer was like, why don't you go out there and measure it? And I'm like, all right, my first road trip, go down, these big executives grab me, we go out to this field, had my trusty, wheel measurer, and they're like, all right, this is where the smokestack's gonna be, and there's a school. And I look out and I can see the kids playing, and I'm just like, what, are you serious? And they're like, yeah, this is it. And so I measure it, and it was like a 1/4 mile and 100 feet. And so I was like, I guess I have to, go forward with this. And I go back to the engineer and I'm like, this doesn't sit right with me. I'm struggling with this. I don't think they quarter mile is enough. I was like, but at least it's not in the prevailing wind. The prevailing wind was taking it off somewhere else. He goes, oh, it's a non-prevailing wind that's more dangerous because that's when it moves slowly and falls out of the air. And I'm just like, how do we do this? And he's like, what are you talking about? We don't know the toxicity of that stuff. And I'm like, I think we do. And he's like, well, it's all about exposure and length of time and stuff. And that was when I was like, I don't know. I think there's enough problems out here that I don't want to be adding to them. I think I want to try to help on the other side. And as a chemical engineer, I felt like I had some pretty good tools in my tool belt to help advance, environmentally responsible causes.
Do you know if anything has changed, like from a regulation standpoint, since then? Or?
In Texas for air pollution, I think it was Bush who actually did the Clean Air Act. And a lot of things did get better, and some things have gotten better over time. Right now, most of it is being dismantled. For those of us that have applauded all the advancements, our hope is that it can come back together soon enough. Also, I feel like my philosophy on sustainability has changed a little bit. I really thought that I needed to be a warrior for the planet. And lately I've shifted, and I tend to think now the planet's gonna be just fine, but we're the ones that are in danger. And so, my sustainability actions, I think, are geared more towards humans, because I think we're the ones in danger. Cancers, continues to grow. Various epidemics are growing, and we're in way more danger than the planet is.
With that core idea in mind that we're in danger more than the planet is, how do you take that knowledge or that idea and translate that into everything that you do in your current business?
Yeah, so the way it has shifted in my business philosophy is, really about human health. And both on the good side, ensuring that we get good things into our bodies that fuel us properly, and helping to try to eliminate the bad things and the assaults on our bodies. And they say that the chemical load of the human body is like 10,000 times what it was even 100 years ago. Every year, there's 10,000 new chemicals invented, and less than 1% of them are actually tested for human safety, and a lot of them are released into the world without any testing. So figuring out how our bodies and other living beings' bodies as well can help eliminate those things and reduce exposure to them is something that I stay very much on top of. And then most of my work is in food, but then within food, understanding how microplastics get into food and what materials to use in packaging and all of those things kind of go into it, so that I'm doing my part to help, and then I support the companies that are doing their part to help.
Awesome. There's obviously studies and that sort of thing coming out like almost every day these days about the effect of these toxicities and that sort of thing. Is there anything that you've come across that would shock like the everyday person listening right now?
I think one of the things that I have always, still to this day, kind of bugs me, that is hard to even find the information, is that underground, pretty much everywhere in the US, there are toxic plumes of chemicals that are being monitored. And if they get too much into the water system, then they have to go down and clean it up. But if they don't, then it just sits there. So there's toxic chemicals underneath us everywhere. And luckily the federal government has programs that go around and try to remediate them. And if they can't clean them up, it's kind of crazy. What they have to do is dig up everything on top of it, dig up the toxic waste, put down liners, put it back down, and seal it. And they just try to seal it in the ground because it's like more dangerous just try to move it somewhere than to just figure out how to seal it if it's getting into waterways and such. So I have an extremely good water filter on my house because they do test the water system for some of these chemicals, some of them they don't. And so they can leach into waterways and keep your garden and raise beds and such. They're usually not that close to the surface, but I think most people would be shocked at how much toxic chemicals there are underneath them at any given time.
What's the best way for again, the everyday person to kind of lessen their consumption or be aware of these things or make a little difference in their own lives?
I think the number one thing is to get and or keep the mind healthy. When we get sick with poor food or too many additives in our food, when our guts get sick, even things like antibiotics can really destroy our gut microbiome, and we should take care to reestablish our own bacteria in order to have a healthy mind, because I think healthy minds make smart decisions, and I think healthy minds can more easily understand the connection we have to the world around us. So that's what I'd say the number one thing is like keep a healthy mind, which dictates also a healthy body. And then in that way, we can all make smart decisions.
Love it. So I cut you off when you were starting to talk about Greenling. Tell me about that business and how it came about.
Yeah, so I tried to do the chain of restaurants in Spain that failed. I lost all of the money that I had made from selling my landscape company. My girlfriend left me, and I contracted a parasite over in Spain, and I got sick over there. And I wound up in the hospital, and by that time, I was fluent conversationally in Spanish, and I could go anywhere and talk to anyone, but it turns out not talking to a doctor. I had no idea what the guy was saying. He eventually was just like, throat red. I'm like, okay. I was like, I think I need to go home now. I was like, I'm pretty much broke. So what I say about the story is that I moved into my mom's couch, broke, sick, and alone, and was like, what the fuck just happened, So I did some real introspection. I tried to reflect on the prior year and how I had gotten there. I had drifted away from sustainability. The restaurants were just gonna be, whatever ingredients we could get over there. And I was like, okay, well, I just spent a year trying to do something. It failed, and I don't feel like the world is any better place for me having tried that. I was like, whatever I do next, I want to know that any given day, if I got hit by a bus that day, that I had been working to help make the world a better place. And so I had known at that point already that food was where I wanted to focus, but I'm like, all right, I need to do good food, and I need to actually try to help the food system improve. So we had the idea for this Meta-CSA product and helping local farmers. And we started investigating food delivery services. A bunch of them had just failed spectacularly in the late 90s. Webvan and I think like Home Grocer had raised billions of dollars and all flashed out. And so me and a buddy of mine who was also an engineer, we studied what happened there, what went wrong with those businesses, and then how we could launch a business and do a similar thing, but in a way that both was good for the environment and also a better business model. And that's where we really kind of honed in on the local food systems. It wasn't a price game like selling Coca-Cola and chips were. So it was about teaching people why quality food is better, and then getting the best quality food that we could out there and getting them to home. So that's how it came about. It's still like I say I worked in the business for 10 years, and it took 20 years of my life from the constant stress of it. But I also, we always remember things more fondly than how we experience them. And still to this day, with all the things that I've done, that business felt like the most fulfilling, because we not only were helping people eat healthier, but we had delivery vans going all over Texas. We had expanded to all major markets in Texas. And we were like, what else can we do with these vans that are going to homes on a weekly basis? And so we would help nonprofits with like book drives and like Brown Santa, and Operation Turkey is this cool nonprofit where they try to get every homeless person a meal on Thanksgiving. And so we would help deliver those. We'd also help store their turkeys and such. So we got to do a lot of really good things for the community. And, all that felt good. None of it made money. But so it was fulfilling, and almost went bankrupt twice doing it.
Tell me about almost going bankrupt twice. I mean, especially when you're personally being fulfilled, you're doing the right thing, and you're making a difference. You really are, obviously, right? But that's got to be discouraging to know that it could end the next day simply because there's just not enough cash.
Yeah. It was obviously really, really hard, and the emotional toll is like there's nothing else that can enter the mind except that. And so no matter what I was doing, and the double whammy of it was that both times it's usually it's the holidays that was the worst season for us, because we were routine. We were people's weekly schedule. And so as soon as mid-November hit, revenue would go down, and it would go down all the way through New Year's, and then it would jump back up. And so basically by November, it's like, do we have enough cash to make it through? And, and so the first time I didn't think we did, it's just like, you can't enjoy the holidays. Like Christmas was not Christmas. Christmas was like, put a face on, pretend like I'm doing okay, and really I wasn't. And that first go round, I'd called a lawyer and was like, what is the process? Because like if we we're already a month behind on rent, like if the utilities get cut off, we're just shut down. Like what's the process? So I learned about the process, and that was one of those moments where I realized that knowing the consequences is way easier than the uncertainty of not knowing. And so when I was just like, I don't know what's gonna happen, do they send me to prison or something? You just don't even know. And I had a mentor at the time who walked me through it, and he's like, no, you get up the next day and you make breakfast and you decide, okay, well that didn't work. What do I do now? And that was just such a, no one tells you about it going into things like that. So you never really learned that until you're there. And it makes it easier to then keep moving and put one foot in front of the other to know what the consequences are. And then also, once we recovered, when we first recovered, the emotional baggage is still there. And it's like, everyone's like cheering, and I'm just like, it takes a long time for that cortisol to relax in the brain. But then once that recovered, then I'm like, okay, like that was incredibly hard. We made it through, and now I feel more resolved in what I'm doing. And so it made me more dedicated to what we were doing.
Yeah, nobody talks about the mental implications of these hard times, I think, or I mean, I suppose it's becoming more common these days, but were there ways that because the pressure's on you, right? Like, or at least that's how it feels at the time, that, the lights go out, it's on me, all these people are without pay, whatever the case may be. Were there ways that you, came up with to deal with that in your own way?
Not healthy ways. I drank a lot, and it's so lonely. And even the people who are like, "Oh, I've been there," I'm like, that doesn't make me feel better. Like, I'm here now, and there's nothing anyone can say that makes that feeling better. Maybe some people take, counsel like that better. I've always been pretty, fiercely independent, and I'm part of, I struggle with authority figures is the same. Like, I struggle to, take advice. I have always been good about having mentors and taking business advice, but when it came to like myself, my parents were always fiercely independent, and so am I. And so none of that really helped. Meditation was the thing that kind of, I would say, like, saved me that first go around, and I really got into it and got really good at it, and that helped me both process emotions in the moment and then also develop an intuition. And there's the meditation style where you think of nothing, and that helps the mind relax and reset, and it can be like, okay, well, we need to work on these other things, and you haven't processed all of this yet. So with an empty mind, for me, it allowed me to help process the emotions. And then I learned this other technique of actually making an energetic connection to the world around me, and then going into problem-solving mode. And that kind of meditation has been phenomenal for developing intuition for decisions that I need to make and strategy going forward.
When you say develop intuition, what do you mean by that?
It's I think most of what happens in our brain is a combination of all of the sum of all of our experiences. I think almost all of them are sitting in our subconscious. So it's the sum of our experiences and then what we choose to focus on. And so I think our subconscious, one of its primary duties is predicting the future. And so what's going to happen here, and it can run scenarios. And so, somewhere between just our brain can get wicked good at that to where consciously we don't even know that it's necessarily got the future right, but we move straight in that direction. Somewhere between there, and then I have recently started to believe that there is like information and stuff external to our brains and our bodies that we somehow access, and how and all of that, I don't know. But what I do know is that I do daily intuitive practices to try to keep myself sharp and understand what's going to be coming at me.
Super fascinating. Mm-hmm. What do those daily practices look like? Like, is that something that I could practice tonight if I wanted to? What would that look like? Yeah.
So the one that I do most often is a hyper awareness exercise, and so the theory is that when we are paying attention to our senses, our physical senses are the strongest signals we receive. but that we do receive signals from other things. And a lot of that is proven, like our hearts right now are somehow feeling each other, and like if we get into a sync, our hearts will align. So there's all these signals around us that we can't physically feel, but if we start with a practice of becoming more aware of the strong signals. So I will sit there every morning, usually on the way to work. I put my car in self-driving mode, and then I sit there and I think of all 5 of my senses at once, and I try to just be super present and in the moment, experiencing everything that's going on around me. And then I let my mind drift to whatever intention or problem I had set out at the beginning of that. And so in that way, and especially doing it on the way to work, as soon as I get to work, I'm just like,
ready to go.
Yeah.
Super cool. Thanks for sharing. Obviously, that business ran its course. There was a time where you decided, okay, I'm going to move on from this. Was that a definitive time? Is that like a period of time that you can identify and remember what you're feeling and the reason why you're ready to move on?
I would call it I'd say there were probably several definitive moments, and then it didn't happen the first several definitive moments. By the time I was almost moving on, we had a large set of investors, a board led by an investor. We'd been through multiple financing rounds. We'd been through a down round, and I learned very acutely that an entrepreneur really loses control of their company almost always before they think they do. So in the round where and my lawyer at the time had warned me of this, he's like, no, they can add this board seat when they want to, and then they have a majority on the board. And I'm like, we were getting along great at the time. I'm like, don't worry about it. And, even if they add a seat, I can sell the board on things. But once I got into conflict with that lead investor, I realized it was, a year and a half earlier that he had gotten control. Now, we'd been losing money, and so I don't blame the guy for wanting to change direction. I didn't agree with the direction that he wanted to go. We butted heads for about a year and tried to compromise, but our, philosophies were too different. I went to a mentor and was like, I don't understand what to do anymore. And he's like, what if you just replaced yourself? You're still, on the board, still an owner, had someone else run it, let him, choose a path, and then, you can still be part of it. And I was like, all right, and so I pitched it to him. He's like, absolutely, because it was really, we needed more investment. And he was like, I'm not investing anymore. I was like, what if I replace myself? And he's like, 100%, I'm in. And so I found someone and replaced myself. I was supposed to have this cushy marketing innovation role, and I didn't agree with the decisions they were making, and I learned very quickly they didn't care about my opinion on that. And so I was like, I can't do this. I can't watch them, destroy my baby. And so I left, and when I left, I didn't get to leave. I was still a personal guarantee on $500,000 of debt. My identity was tied up in this company, and so it was really bad. And I, went into a depressive state and was just not doing anything at all. In that, just on a random, my mom made me go out to lunch. I think I hadn't left my apartment in a week, and she's like, I'm coming by. I'm taking you to lunch. And she goes, there's this thing called a float tank. You need to go do it. And I'm like, Mom, what are you talking about? She's like, I bought you one. Just go do the float tank, will you? And I'm like, all right, fine. So I go do the float tank, and my mind was just able to unleash everything and shed the baggage that was on me. And my brain was able to get more clarity. And the first thing my brain wanted to do was forgive all the people that had done me wrong or that I thought had done me wrong. We were all just in self-preservation mode as the company was struggling. And so my mind forgave all the people and was like, they were just trying to do what they thought was best. And that was in conflict with what I thought. And so once it forgave everyone, I was like, okay, well, brain, like, what do we do next? By this time, it was like my 5th float tank. As soon as I did that first one, I was like, oh, I'm all in. But when I went my 3rd time in 1 week, they're like, whoa, like you can't do more than 3 a week. I'm like, what do you mean? They're like, you can like start to lose touch with reality if you do these things too much. And I was like, all right, well, 3 a week it is then. And I was like, all right, brain, well, we have left the company, forgive everyone. I feel kind of at peace. Like, what do you want to do now? And all it wanted to do was dream up new businesses. And I'm like, okay, I guess I'm still an entrepreneur, having just been through this really rough time. So I started dreaming up new businesses and just like not paying attention to what they were doing. And then they called me and were like, hey, we're shutting the company down. I'm like, whoa, wait, what? Like, what are you talking about? You said you were going to invest again. And he wasn't the one I was talking to. One of the other is the CEO. And he was like, well, yeah, it was in tranches. And he decided not to do the other tranches once his idea didn't work. And I'm like, man, there's like farmers still counting on this. And like, if anything, it has to be a longer wind down. You can't just shut down, or some of these farmers may struggle to survive. And there were still 40 people employed. And so I was like, let me try to step back in and find a better path. And they were like, okay, but there needs to be some kind of timeline for you finding a better path. I'm like, totally understand, what do y'all think is a good timeline? And they're like, 2 weeks. Like, are you kidding me? And one of the board members said I just turned white as a ghost. And they were like, that's how long until we're out of money. So, we're not trying to be rude here, but that's your timeline. So in the next, I think it was like in the next 48 hours, I had 90 phone calls, and just in the middle of the night with people in Europe, just everything that I could do to try to figure out how to save the company, and I had a mentor that was walking me through some of that. And what they had done, while I thought they were going to destroy the company, and they ended up shutting it down or wanting to shut it down, but they contracted the company and shed a bunch of stuff that I probably wouldn't have had the strength to do, because it was, letting people go, shutting down offices, and what do you do when you shut down an office? But where they had taken the company back down to, I looked at the P&L and I was like, I know how to make that profitable. It was profitable last time, it was at that level. And my mentor is like, well, you got to step in and do it. I'm like, no, I can't do that. And he's like, all right, then let him shut it down. And I'm like, ah. So I took a $50,000 cash advance off of the last credit card I had. That was the last money anyone on the planet was going to give me. And I made an offer to buy back the company for $50,000, which it had been valued at, over 10 million just a couple of years earlier. Bought it back for $50,000, and they were losing $30,000 a month at the time. And I was like, all right, I've got 6 weeks to fix this or I'm out of cash. And that time I filled out all the bankruptcy paperwork. I was like, at one point, if we had missed revenue by $5,000 in a week, I was going to file. I was like, if we miss it, like we're down. If we miss it, I know there's no recovering, and we're just going to call it. But I got the company profitable in 30 days, turned it around, and then again there was that emotional baggage hanging out. But I'm like, all right, now I've got this company back. I got it profitable. We're paying the farmers, we're paying the people, but it's still in a struggling industry with Amazon and Instacart and all kinds of pressures around it that have better technology, not bogged down by the assets that we were bogged down by. I had like 92 compressors that I was in charge of for cooling air. And there's a lot of compressors. And so I was like, I've got to sell the company for whatever anyone will take for it, because I think there's probably some future, but I'm not the one who can do it. And that was the point when I knew, I just turned it around in 30 days, and I'm like, this is amazing, and I can't wait to get out. I'll say that again. This is amazing, and I can't wait to get out. So I sold the company to another local food delivery service, and out of that was born my rocket ship, Cece's Veggie Co.
Wild, man. That's a crazy story.
It was crazy.
What was it that, like, you obviously had some sort of like super deep rooted conviction that you were able to do it, right? Like you said, you took the last cash that was available to you and made it happen. What was it? What was it that made you know that you could do this?
Yeah, I didn't know. And so for me, what it actually was, it wasn't that I knew I could do it, but what I knew was that if I didn't go down fighting, I'd regret it the rest of my life. I was like, I have to go down in a blaze of glory, was what I would say. I was like, I am fighting till the very last breath. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. And I had a business group of peers that would meet all the time, and they're like, so what's going on? I was like, yeah, if we miss revenue by $5,000 next week, we're going bankrupt. I got all the papers ready, and they couldn't fathom how calm I was, but at least at that point it was definitive, and it back to that thing, it was so much easier than the uncertainty. And so I had to accept, like, if I were to do this, I think long ago I had shed concerns for what other people thought of me, because I had just been through enough of the ups and downs to know all the things about luck and just like, and I knew that I had been trying my best. And I was like, if I'm trying my best and I have to go file bankruptcy, then that means that good people who are doing good things have to go file bankruptcy, because I think I'm a good person and I'm doing good things. And so just knowing what the outcomes were was one of the more peaceful, times of my career as an entrepreneur.
I think that's a huge lesson that we can all take, is the uncertainty is way scarier, right? Yeah, love it. So you go into Cece's right after that. How give me a timeline. How long ago is that from, or how long ago was that? About
10 years ago.
10 years ago now. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so I was still running Greenling. I had the idea for Cece's in a float tank before I bought back Greenling. And so still kind of on the side, I was working on it. At Greenling, we had a prep kitchen, so we were chopping onions. And so I understood well the labor that goes into processing vegetables and the packaging and everything. So I had like 5 viable businesses, and my brain dreamed up in float tanks. And each time I had a new one, I'd get out of the float tank and I'd write it all down. And often, it was soup to nuts. It was like, okay, well, how does it start? How does it scale? Where does it go? What's the purpose? And that one was the one where I knew more of the answers than any of the others. So I'm like, all right, this one I know really well. And I know, here are the things that I need to learn. So here are the things I don't know. And so I just went after it. I ended up inventing a machine that makes pasta out of fresh vegetables in a novel way. There were things called spiralizers that were out there, but they were all kind of like hand crank things, very slow. And so I invented a machine that could do it fast and higher quality than a lot of those spiralizers. So we were able to attain a shelf life of a processed vegetable that not many vegetables can even attain. When you go to the store and you see all those chopped vegetables, now they've gotten really good at like the gases and different kinds of rinses that maintain shelf life, which, surprisingly, a lot of people think longer shelf life, they must be doing something bad to it. In fresh vegetables, that's not really the case. Now in food, when you're getting a multi-year shelf life and you have preservatives, those preservatives, the whole point is to not break down the food, and our bodies are supposed to break down the food, so those two things are in conflict. But for vegetables, it's all time and temp and microbiological control, yeast and mold and such, and almost none of that is harmful to our bodies. We did it mostly with sanitation, and there's a whole rabbit hole that I go down because I'm a chemical engineer, and I loved the microbiology of it. I loved learning about what happens when you move a knife across a vegetable. There's some really fascinating things at a cellular level that can happen. So I was inventing this machine, and I was very clear about what I thought, what consumers needed to be willing to pay for the company to be successful. And so as I was developing that idea, going through all this other stuff, but working in the background, my two biggest things were like, one, I need to spend as little money as humanly possible on this. I literally have no money. And two, I need to figure out how much consumers will pay for this. And so I did these focus groups where all I did was pay for a professional facilitator, and at the time it was like $500. They developed the script for it with me, and we did it at my house. People were at the dining room table. They didn't know it was my house though. We took down all the pictures, so they didn't know where they were. And I put a drop cam on the dining room table, and then I was in the other room watching it and taking notes. And that's how I developed the packaging around it, and got to the point where the question is not how much would you pay for this. The question is how much would you expect this to be at the grocery store, and that's how you get a little bit closer to what they would actually pay. And I knew it had to be $4.99. If it was below that, I was going to shut it all down. I was like, if consumers won't pay for it, it's not a real business. And the average was $5.87. And I knew we could make money. We could be profitable out of the gates at $4.99. So I was like, all right, let's go do this. And then the very last question was, will people actually pick it up off the shelf? And so spent a lot of time researching consumer behavior, researching the shelf that we were going to be on, who the competitors were, how to differentiate, how to pop off the shelf, design packaging for it. And I showed it to the buyer at Whole Foods for this region, and they were like, how quickly can you get it to me? And I was like, I guess give me a couple of weeks. Like it was like one. We had made one at that point. And so then we scrambled to get more packaging, and we launched in the Whole Foods here in Austin, their flagship store. And I had not, at Greenling, we had sold a ton of products, and that's where I learned a lot about, price point attributes, all the things that make things sell, because I'd been evaluating things for 10 years. But I didn't know what good velocity was on the shelf at a grocery store. And nobody could believe our velocity. I mean, we were selling 150 units per week in the one store. And, you go to the center of store, things like bars and such, you're doing pretty well if you sell 1 to 2 per week per store. And so I kept calling the buyer and be like, is this good? Like, I don't know, is it good enough, or should we? And they're like, yeah, it's fine. And I'm like, that's such a weird answer. She says, yeah, it's fine. So I'm like, all right, I got to figure out this industry. I start calling around. I'm like, here's what we're doing, and here's our velocity. And I remember this one investor was like, no, that's not your velocity. You must be thinking of like per month or per quarter or something. I was like, no, it's per week. Like, I know how to do math. And he's like, oh, well, then you must be talking about across all of your items, not just the one item. I'm like, no, there's one thing, zucchini noodles. We sell 150 units per week in this store. And he goes, holy shit. I was like, oh, so that's good? He's like, yeah, that's phenomenal. I'm like, okay, I think we're on to something. And so then that motivated me to even more quickly sell Greenling, because I'm like, okay, we've got something here. And so finished that transaction, sold Greenling, got out with just my shirt and like $100K of debt that I had to like pay off over time, kind of thing. And that was fine because Greenling had a great new home and people who still very much cared about it. And then we were, kind of off to the races, but for CPG, most people, everyone tells entrepreneurs they have to co-pack. And so you have to have someone else make it because you don't want to take on the manufacturing. But nobody knew how to make these things. And they were really hard to make and really hard to get into a package because, pasta is, squirrely like that, but you can stretch it and do a lot of things with it and it's still fine. Vegetables are very sensitive, but you cut them into squares and stuff so you can toss them around. These noodles you couldn't do either. You're just like holding it and like gently chopping it. So the operations side of it was really hard. And but that's where I have the most fun. So I love, figuring things out and how to do things and figuring out how to scale that appropriately. And because I had done so much in the community with Greenling, I would reach out to people and be like, hey, can you help me? And they're like, whatever you need. And so at time, I had 2 people offering me essentially free space to make the product in, if I just like helped them with their business. And the one place where I went, we were renting for the whole first year of the business. I closed my books each month in 15 minutes because I only wrote 4 checks. There was 1 check to the guy I was renting from because it included all personal protective equipment. Everything about that was to one check for the people that I was paying, 1 check for the vegetables, and 1 check for the packaging, and 1 packaging company. And so the first year was just wicked simple. We only had 2 products, and everyone was like, "You've got to start expanding." I'm like, no. I was like, not until we've really figured this out. We're not doing anything else. And it was phenomenal, and it did grow like a rocket ship. And we ended up like we were in Whole Foods nationwide, HEB, 3 or 4 other major regional players. I was still bootstrapping it. Every now and then, I would still have to put payroll on a credit card, and I'm like, okay, this is going really well. Why am I doing this? And for me, the answer was, I know what the capital waterfall is going to be if I take money. If I take money now, I'm on a timeline, and I can't stop that timeline. And so I want to get the company to 10 million in revenue before I take any outside money, so that the timeline hopefully gets me to 100 million plus, and a big fat exit before I lose control of the company. And so I'm like, all right, put the payroll on credit card and go after Kroger because they're not paying us on time. But then finally I talked to every bank that I could. 2 banks didn't believe me that we had grown that fast. I'm like, well, what do you mean? They're like, well, our committee just doesn't believe that. I'm like, but I sent you the information. Like, should I send you some POs or something? And they're like, well, we just we're not interested in this. We don't believe you. And I'm like, well, that was rude. And the growth was real, and it really was just about increasing mechanical efficiency of the equipment. And I was doing that piecemeal And I'm like, all right, we've got Costco wants it. They want it in multiple regions. That's like 4x growth immediately. I was like, we've got to build a facility. And so I'm like, all right, it's time to take equity. So we went for outside money. 2 years after starting the company, we were at a 12 million annual run rate after the 2 years. And we raised a bunch of money. And then one thing I learned from Greenling, I was like, take chips off the table when things are going well. So I did secondary and pulled some money out of the business, and some early investors, they gave them opportunity to sell out, and some of them did. A couple of them were employees. The first employees, I put them on vesting schedules, and they sold some of that and made some money. So it was, the culmination was to get millions of dollars into my bank account 2 years after I had been $5,000 away from filing for bankruptcy. It was just absolute insanity. And that was the moment. I live in the future, and I'm always thinking about the future and what's next. And, I rarely slow down to celebrate. But man, that moment, we were closing, and I was in Dallas selling some retailer, and we had the closing meeting, and I was going to the airport, and I'm just like refreshing. I was like, so when's the money gonna hit? And they're like, well, we'll initiate the wire in a few minutes here, so you should have it pretty quick. Sitting there refreshing on my phone, go through the airport, refreshing, board the plane. I'm like, man, it's not gonna hit. And like, we were on the runway about to take off, and I refresh, and the money's there. And I immediately start paying off credit cards, and we're like in the air.
The 50K that you borrowed previously.
Yeah, and much more. I still had a ton of credit card debt, and so I was paying off the credit cards, and I get down to the last one, and I hit pay it, and I'm like, refresh and show me that it's done before we lose signal, and then it showed it 0, and then I lost signal, and then I fell asleep. It's just like I'm out with that kind of weight lifted. All I wanted to do at that point was sleep.
Best flight ever.
Yeah. And then, people were like, well, what'd you do to celebrate? I'm like, I sat on the couch and stared at a wall. I was just like, this feels great. I don't need to do anything about it. I was like, just this feeling is so great. So that was an amazing moment.
You've talked a lot about throughout your journey, you've talked about mentors and that you've always valued them. But I'm curious as to what the importance of that relationship between an entrepreneur and a mentor might be.
Yeah, and I feel like I've always had a little bit of a unique philosophy on mentors and relationship. I think part of my problems with authority and I'm always kind of thinking about what are people's goals, and lots of people, and I mentor tons of entrepreneurs, and I'm just there to help, and lots of mentors are just there to help, and we all I give back because I got so much from mentors, but I'm also quick to tell people I don't have experience in this. I think you need to find someone who has more experience in this. And that's what I always sought. I'm like, okay, well now I need a lot of financial help. I need to go find a financial mentor. And so I usually never had more than 2 at a time. I read this book a long time ago, Never Eat Alone, I think is what it's called. And it's a great book. It's everybody eats lunch. Offer to buy someone lunch, they're gonna eat it anyway. And if you don't buy it for them, they're gonna pay for it. And all they are required to do is spend a little time with you and answer some questions. So I was constantly asking people to lunch, and if I liked what they had to say, I would take note of that and then be like, hey, is there, any way you wouldn't mind having a few more conversations with me? And so I would always look for, what I was really struggling with at the time, and really just to bounce ideas off of them. And anyone who got like, here's what you need to do, I'm like, man, I don't think you know what I need to do. Like, this is a new business model, and you may think but nobody knows, right? The person who knows the best what to do is me, and I'm struggling, and so I don't think anyone knows what I should do right now. But so I really gravitated to people who are like, well, here's my experience, and here's a story that I have that sounds similar to this, and those are always amazing for me, and it's almost as much value comes out of talking about my problem out loud to someone else as their actual feedback to it. Being able to articulate the problem is like half the battle. Sometimes they say, like, half the problem is articulating the problem clearly and concisely. So I always try to find people who can let me do that and ask the right questions, or like, well, I don't understand what you're saying there, and like, that doesn't sound like a problem. And you're like, oh, right, like that's not actually part of the problem. I just think it is because it's a like tactical thing, when really there's an underlying issue here that I'm not addressing or thinking about. And so that's how I've approached mentorship. I've only had one person in my career who never let me buy them lunch. It was this he was like VP of everything at Whole Foods. I was on a panel with him, and we had a lot of great banter in the panel. And it was literally like VP of supply chain, X, Y, Z, A, B, C. And I'm like, hey, can I buy you lunch? He's like, yeah, sure. Call my assistant, call her up. She's like, you'll have to talk to him, or they kept bouncing me back and forth. And he's like, oh, not now, not for a while. I'm not going to be in town for a while. For 2.5 years, once a quarter, I would email and be like, hey, can we grab lunch now? And after 2.5 years, he's like, Mason, I just don't think we're ever going to be able to find the time to get together for lunch. I'm like, okay, you could have said that 2.5 years ago. Yeah. Like, now you wasted my time. I feel like you owe me lunch. But other than that, everyone that I could get a hold of and directly ask to buy them lunch, let me buy them lunch. And I got just tons of amazing information from that, and was able to kind of like vet mentors as well.
Yeah, totally. And become a sponge, right? You're just asking the right questions. They're asking you the right questions back.
Yeah.
Love it. How do you know when you've outgrown a mentor?
Yeah, I think it's when I'm no longer they're not asking the right questions anymore, where I'm like, I would get to the end of a lunch, and, one of them, like an early mentor, this guy, Gary Hoover in town, I mean, just like, amazing entrepreneur, and he was always willing to go to lunch and talk, but somewhere along the way, like, he really had been 50,000 foot for long enough, and I was still like, yeah, but we're having these problems, and he would just go back and repeat things that he had said earlier, and I'm like, okay, well, either he thinks I'm not listening, or he's no longer asking the right questions. He doesn't know where these problems are going, and so that's what I always felt like when I had a lunch, where I'm like, I don't feel like they asked the right questions. And then if they moved into give advice mode, then I'm like, okay, I think this one's kind of run its course, and I need to find a new one. And that's when I'm like, okay, well, what's the problem is usually in one silo of business. And so I'd identify that and go find people that I thought were smart.
Yeah, people are like seasons in that regard too, right? And it's nothing to do with them. It's just that they no longer fit that bill. Yeah.
And me too, as a mentor. Some people want to keep calling me, and I'm like, you are beyond what I can help with on your entrepreneurial journey. Except for maybe like just the actual like emotional journey, but I'm not a therapist.
Awesome. So fast forward after your exit from Cece's. Now small potatoes.
Yeah, so exiting Cece's, I was like, okay, that was a rocket ship. I know there was a ton of luck involved. The odds of doing that twice are so low that I don't want to even try anywhere in the same realm. And so first I did a media company and we did a podcast, and I wanted to learn about content to product funnels and still, eventually selling things. I like to sell things and I think I'm good at that, but I knew I needed time to figure out what the thing is I wanted to sell. So the podcast allowed us to explore a lot of different areas, talk to really smart people doing really cool things, and thought maybe we'd be able to at least make a sustainable business out of the podcast. We were unable to do it. I admire all podcasters who, do more than one season, and because it's hard what y'all do. And someday I'll pick it back up. But also my wife ended up not liking it very much. We did it together, and she would just get really stressed out by it. And she was good at it because she loved asking questions, and she can ask questions very rapid fire and all high value questions. But she just didn't like it. But we did find a business that was in the pet food industry. And so I'm like, all right, this is a different industry. Very different market. You're selling to someone who's not consuming the product. It's hard to tell if the consumer of the product likes it or not. It's just like, you get a dog hungry enough, they're going to eat anything. And now having had a dog for a while, I realize it's a little easier to tell than that. We could be like, why are you not eating this food? And it had some really cool science behind it that wasn't fully developed. And so that really attracted me. So it was a hard problem to solve and in a new industry. And so we went after that. And at Cece's, the company had grown to a level where I had a full executive team, all with competing egos. And we had, a large team at the company, and there was lots of inner conflict up and down and cross and wide, and none of that stuff was fun to me. And so I'm like, I'm really excited to get back into 0 to 1. And after a while of mopping floors, I'm like, man, I think I like having other people to do this stuff for me. And I wanted to be true to the entrepreneurial journey of we need to make this business work, and not just lose a bunch of money, trying to make it work. So that meant really getting into the weeds with it. Couldn't quite make it work. And so I peeled out of that. It was still kind of operating, but I was like, that was a 1.5-year journey that, was not, did not go the way we planned. I didn't end up having as much fun as I thought I was going to have. And I'm like, what happened? Went back into the self-reflection and introspection cycle. And so I was like, I need to get back to my roots. The thing I didn't do with that business was a bunch of research up front. And I'm like, I need to get back to doing research. So I did some consulting with small CPG companies, just helping them kind of get over those first few humps. I saw that financial markets were going to dry up for the industry, rising interest rates. It's one of the first to go. I think the stat, CPG is second only in opportunity for a massive outcome to movies. Movies is the only other place where you can make more money in a shorter amount of time than CPG, but it's also extremely highly risky, and movies is even more high risk. And so money dries up when things are uncertain. So I tried telling all these people that, and none of them would listen to me. They're all like, no, we're going to raise money in 6 months to a year. I'm like, I really don't think you are. If you want to survive, you need to figure out how to make this cash flow positive. And they're like, that's not how this industry works, Mason. And I'm like, I think it's about to be that way. So I was like, all right, I think there's going to be a lot of distress in the market. And I could also look at their P&Ls, and I generally knew how to fix it. I'm like, I think I know I could make this company profitable there's like a relatively small list of mistakes that early entrepreneurs make, and the list is like maybe 10 or 12, and you only have to make 3 or 4 of them to take a company down. And I'm like, all right, there's going to be distress in the market. I love operations. Everyone is spending too much money on co-packers and packaging and all the inputs to the business. If we consolidated all of that and self-manufactured, but for a variety of brands, based on my pro formas, I was like, I think, we can make it go at this. And then I have things that are not 0 to 1 that have proven there's a customer base there for them, but that I can still innovate on, which at the end of the day is what I love most. And so I'm like, all right, let's see if this can work. Just started cold calling. I evaluated 150 businesses in 6 months, identified 2 that I thought were like perfect first candidates because they would be pretty easy to turn around, but also had cool products that I thought were, great for the marketplace. And so once I acquired one, all of a sudden then people just started throwing companies at me. They're like, oh, he's for real. He knows how to close a deal too, which was easier for me as an entrepreneur who had been through, everything that these distressed entrepreneurs are going through. I was like, I've been there. I was like, if we don't do a deal, here's what I think you should do. And usually it was fairly simple, and it's like, you've got to let go of your ego on this. You've got to let go of your growth expectations and realize, come to terms that you're in distress and that you need to make it profitable, because, nobody's going to just save the business. But I'll take it over if you want. I would always offer that they would stay on, but it's so hard for an entrepreneur to do, as I had experienced. And so, I would tell them, it's okay if you don't. They're like, yeah, I want to. I'm like, I get it. Here's what your role will look like. And then usually it doesn't quite work out. But we've acquired 6 companies. We turned one around very quickly and sold it, and that helped finance some more acquisition and build out of our facilities. So we have 20,000 square foot here just north of Austin, where we manufacture, it's all gluten-free. The facility is certified gluten-free baked goods. We have an organic certification people can jump on. And we make a lot of cookies. We make stuff for other people. We make all of our own brand stuff. And I'm having some of the most fun that I've ever had, because I've invented like 6 new products. The team was like, Mason, you got to slow down. We have to like launch these and support them before we come up with new ones. And I'm like, all right. So, we're going through that process, but I can't wait to just keep, bringing out new things that I think, help people eat healthier and make the world a little better.
Awesome. What's, if you don't mind giving me a bit of an insight into the criteria that you look at when because you said you identify, the first one was 150 businesses and you narrowed it down to 2.
Yeah.
Was there commonalities or similarities between the ones that you look for? So
when looking at companies, the first thing I looked at was a product. I was like, is this a good product? Like, is it something that, has proven some traction, but that I think is a quality product and is in some way helping people or the planet? And so that's criteria number 1. And then I'm like, all right, if there's good product, is it something that should be made? Does it, on a unit economics basis, can it make money? Or is it, because sometimes, people will throw out, like beef tallow fried chips, and I'm like, that's a $10 bag of chips. Like, it's like, that obviously there is a market. There's one company that has done really well with it. I'm not as good at the high-end market. I think, the uber wealthy have the resources to do good by themselves and the planet. I want to help make things more accessible for the rest of people. And so that requires that it's something that, is better is rarely like the best thing out there, because we need more better stuff, not more best stuff, you know? So, you know, can the product actually make money? Is it a good product? And then it comes down to, you know, why are they in distress? If it's a good product and it can make money, and identifying things that are in distress for reasons that are fixable, or, you know, haven't gone too far. Some companies took on like a ton of debt and then revenue contracted, and I'm like, this company's never going to be able to pay that debt service. And so I'm like, sorry, like there's something else has got to happen here. I can't help because there's too much debt on it. Oftentimes there's mismanagement, just people don't know how to properly spend money. And so they either like pay people too much or went out and spent a bunch on some other things, but most common is marketing. People are chasing growth. They're like, we need to grow, grow, grow. And so they're spending millions of dollars on marketing, not knowing what the results are. And it's driving growth, but they don't know, you know, how much of it they can cut and still grow. And, you know, I walk into that and be like, just stop it all. And it's like, you don't even know what your baseline growth rate is. And a lot of the companies, if all they did was stop marketing even for a while, they'd be profitable. But people struggle to make that decision. And I would tell them that while talking about the deal. I'm like, you realize if you just stopped marketing, you would be profitable very quickly. And they're like, but then we stopped growing. And I'm like, maybe. But, you know, I think what the environment is right now, that's what you need to do, not try to continue looking for money.
Wild. And these are all things that you've learned in your journey from landscaping to current.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Awesome.
Yeah.
If you were to speak to a younger version of yourself, pre-landscaping business, and you were able to give yourself a couple lessons that you've learned up to this point, what would that be?
Yeah, it's a very interesting question, and my answer is that I wouldn't say anything. I think that everything that I have done is critical for me being where I am right now, and I love life. I love where I am. I love what I'm doing, and the only thing that I would change about my past is to like hurt less people that I hurt inadvertently. But I never intentionally did it. And, you know, I think it's a fact of life. People get hurt along the way. And so I wouldn't tell my younger self anything.
That's the first time I've heard that answer, and I really like it. That's awesome. You are, hopefully we're not spilling the beans on this one, but you're writing a book.
I'm writing a book. Yeah, I'm glad we had time to get to it. I love telling stories, so I end up sometimes dragging on.
Tell me about the book.
Yeah, so, you know, the genesis of it was in this kind of dark time when the dog food's not working, and I feel like a failure as an entrepreneur and a failure as a person. And I had this just super weird vision. Now, I've had a lot of intuitive visions, and I mostly ascribe it to my brain predicting the future and saying, here's how things are going to go. And then it's, you know, eerily accurate, but I can still say that that was my brain coming up with it. It was one night, I was feeling really weird, and I did something I'd never done before, where I go out and I floated in my pool. It was a hot summer night, and I was just staring up and just kind of released everything. And I feel like this entire vision got handed to me. It's the only time I was like, it couldn't have come from my brain. I was like, there's nothing in my experiences that I could think would have created this. It's a framework for looking at life. Call it the puzzle, and it's to me it's beautiful in its spectrum from simplicity to as deep as you want to go. And essentially, it's that, if we look at our life like a puzzle, and that we're walking through this kind of three-dimensional puzzle, and everything around us are the parts of our lives, are the pieces that we're putting down. And time moves on, and time places puzzle pieces whether you do it or not. And if you're not in control of yourself, or you're skating through life, then other people are putting them in front of you in service of them. But if you're in control, then you are placing pieces and building this tapestry that you can look at behind you. And how we move through this puzzle is how we're showing up in the world. And core to it for me is this cycle between being present during the day and all the way down to, from Zen Buddhism, like what are the things right in front of you, and be present for that. And then, back to like a stoicism or other forms of self-reflection. And so this cycle of being present during the day and then self-reflecting either at night or weekly or whatever cadence kind of fits for your life. I started applying this, and it's allowed me, I think it's what created Small Potatoes, and it's created now this life for me that at one point I had dreamed of, and people were like, you should start like a venture studio or an incubator because you're so innovative. And I'm like, I don't know how to do that. And there's not, as an innovator, like I'm not an admin for an incubator. I'm like, I don't know how to create this thing. But this cycle of presence and self-reflection has led to, what I'm doing, and the practice of presence in and of itself allowed me to find more joy in my days than I ever thought possible as well. And so, when I had the vision, I was like scrambling to write it all down as it was coming, and it was just like overloading, and it was way more than I could write down. And after it, I shared it with a group of friends. I'm like, I don't understand like why this was handed to me and what I do with it. And I'm like, well, first I'm just going to apply it. And so I applied it, and, as Small Potatoes came about, and as I refined these practices, I was like, I felt compelled to share it. And then I decided not to. Then I was like, yeah, you need to, and then not to. And I talked to people about it, and like writing books is kind of an egocentric practice, like why does anyone care what I want to share with the world? It has to be like, I want to share it with the world. So there was some, I think, struggle there to decide to write the book. But in the end, in a float tank, I was like, if there's one person that this helps, that then, because another theme of the book is that we're all part of the collective puzzle, and that all of our puzzles are connected in one way or another. And everyone we've interacted with our whole life, our puzzles are connected, and there's an energy to that. And that helping other people with their puzzles, if I have pieces that can help someone else in their path, that they're struggling to find the right piece, and they're like, something's not working here, and I can step in and be like, oh, I know how to do that. Like, you can learn from me. That in and of itself like grows our puzzles together and grows a collective puzzle. And so in this float tank, my brain was like, if you share this and it helps other people, and then maybe they come back and help you, and then we all are able to grow together. So I was able to make the decision to write it, and I'm, sticking to that as I go through. It's the same as any content creator. It's like, are people interested in this, and why am I doing it? And so I'm still going through all those things, but I'm very far along, and I think I should have a final product before the end of the year. But I've been detailing, my thoughts as I expand around it. And in a website, thepuzzle.life is kind of a newsletter, Substack thing where I'm exploring these ideas. So they can already be learned about, and then the book will be a bunch about the vision and lessons in my life.
Awesome. First of all, I love the idea. I think it's fascinating. And I think it's really cool that you're almost like, not testing would be the wrong word, but testing these ideas with an audience that see how they resonate, see how they relate, right?
Yeah.
Super awesome.
Yeah. And that, someone told me to do that. They were like, I was like, wow, it's gonna, I want to write the book. And they're like, man, just start writing. Just start writing and put stuff out there. And I'm like, yeah, it's not like I need to hold in all these ideas. And I had written like an outline and a few, kind of like the core of some chapters early on. And then as I've been writing the Substack, I felt like I rediscovered my voice. I used to, at Greenling, I had this newsletter I wrote every week. And when I sold the company, I had 100,000 subscribers and I loved it. And we got so much feedback and I had so much fun writing. And so I really do love writing. And as I rediscovered my voice, I looked back to that first draft and was like, oh man, that was not very good writing. So I'm excited to have gotten the practice to rediscover my voice and now apply that and share the stories, because it turns out, as I was writing these little newsletters, it was when I would weave it in part of my life and like how I learned the lesson that applied to that part of the book that resonated with people. And they were like, oh man, that was so awesome. And I'm like, okay, that's what I need to do is use the framework and the puzzle to tell stories, and then the stories will help the lessons stick from the puzzle.
It's full circle. It's really awesome.
Yeah,
cool.
And it's the this tattoo, which is one of only 2 tattoos I have. The presence, exercise, or it's really the reminder. There's a Buddhist parable about a Zen master and a young monk, and the monk goes to the Zen master, and Zen master is like, you look upset. He's like, all I do all day is chop wood, carry water. I need to learn about all these texts, and I need to learn because I want to become you one day. And, his response was like, yeah, I did all that, but once I got here, I realized it's all chopping wood and carrying water. And if you treat what's right in front of you as if you were a Zen master and the most important thing in front of you, then everything is chopping wood and carrying water. And so I use the phrase to get me to work every day when I was really struggling. And I was like, I'm going to take that lesson and I'm going to go have a good time and really take care of everything that I do. And it seemed like it was just magical over, I don't even know how many, it was a few weeks, but at some point I just started experiencing this spontaneous joy on my way home. And I'm like, I literally just mopped floors for 2 hours and we're losing money and I'm broke again and like, what's going on? And I'm like, but I'm just so happy. And that's when I was like, okay, there's something really going on with this framework and this practice.
That needs to be shared because too many people don't experience that, right?
Yeah.
They're missing that joy in their life. So,
yeah.
Awesome. So the puzzle.life, you said, right?
Puzzle.life.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Where else can we send people to follow along the rest of your journey?
I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. I started engaging with it primarily for deal flow, to stay top of mind. If people were, phase 1 was distress. I want to get into buying non-distressed companies that are on a growth path, because I think I can help and do more. But also, it turns out we're really good at turning around distressed companies. So we want to try to save better for you products. It's a real struggle out there right now for CPG companies. And so active on LinkedIn. Smallpotatoes.life is the center for the brands and the co-manufacturing facility. And then I have my own site, masonarnold.com, if you want to learn more about me.
Mason, thank you so much for this conversation, man. It's been awesome.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
I feel like we covered so much, but we also only scratched the surface. So we'll have to come back and do it again.
Yeah, I would love that.
Awesome. Thanks, man.
All right, thank you.